Dr. Tanvo is wearing glasses and a green shirt.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tanvo, pronounced he, they. I am a science policy analyst at the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. And welcome to the F32 Researcher Spotlight. This is the NIH Brain Block series that focuses on highlighting the voice of F32 fellows. I'm very excited that during our conversation today is Dr. Taylor Webb. So hello, Taylor. Would you mind to kick off this conversation to briefly introduce yourself and your current position?
Yeah.
Dr. Taylor Webb is wearing a blue sweater.
So as you said, my name's Taylor Webb, pronouns he, him. I am a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Utah and did my PhD work at Stanford University. I currently study how we can use ultrasound to treat the brain. What's exciting about ultrasound is it's non-invasive and you can get to deep brain regions. So it's kind of like surgery without a scalpel is the way I like to say it. Or as my 10-year-old says, it's a magical cap to take care of brain problems. I'm also a dad. I have 4 children. Yeah, that's just kind of a brief overview.
Thank you so much for the introduction.
Yeah, I'd love to. I could talk about this all day.
So I was just gonna walk us back to one step and asking you this question. So what inspired you when you grew up to be a scientist?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've always had a fascination with just the elegance of the universe and trying to understand it and the elegant ways in which math represents it so beautifully. So I was interested in engineering and science from a very young age. While I was in college, I actually had a young sister who was diagnosed with cancer. And that journey made me very interested in the medical space. And I started learning about how the elegance of the universe can be translated into a machine like an MR scanner that takes advantage of that, predictable elegance to look into someone's brain, again, non-invasively. And I became fascinated with the ways in which you can take math and change people's lives because you're able to, medically do something with your understanding of the way the universe works. And so I started becoming interested in medicine. And this was about the time I was finishing my undergraduate and master's work at Brigham Young University. And so when I started my PhD, I took advantage of that transition to move from the research that I was doing, creating tools for astronomy, to start creating tools for medicine. And so then as a postdoctoral fellow, I kind of transitioned from the high intensity ablation to low intensity neuromodulation applications. And that's how I got to this lab.
You mentioning that you have a switch from the objective of your research. So let me ask you this question. In your current research you're doing right now, does that change of objective goals have some challenging for you to do research?
Yes, absolutely. And both transitions into my PhD program and then into my postdoc were definitely rich with challenges. Learning new language, learning new ways of thinking about problem solving. When I came to my postdoc, I do a lot of animal work here. There's a big learning curve there coming from a primarily engineering background and having to learn some biology. And I'm still learning neurobiology, to be honest. And I think one thing that's interesting about academia that's both a challenge and an opportunity. On the one hand, you have access to a lot of mentors. On the other hand, there's not a lot of formal training when you make transitions like this. And so learning how to take advantage of those mentors when there wasn't a formal program to sort of help me do so was a bit of a challenge. But also it means a lot of independence, and it means I've gotten to study what's most interesting to me. And so rich with challenges and also, a lot of fun.
Well, great to hear that. Well, I did hear that you mentioning it's a little bit challenging for you to find a mentor. Do you have any advice for incoming postdoc that they're interested into how they're finding a mentor?
It's an interesting question, and I feel like there's a lot of ways to address it. And I think you're asking specifically about finding a mentor, right? That's kind of the specific question you want me to address. Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 pieces of advice. One is pursue something you're really interested in. Make sure your mentor is interested in things you're interested in. And in academia, it can sometimes be tempting to make yourself the product instead of making science the product. And then it can be tempting to go for the most prestigious mentor or the most, the mentor who's most likely to help you with connections, et cetera. But I think I thrive best when I'm really excited about the work that I'm doing. And so I think making a priority of choosing a mentor that's going to encourage you to do work you're excited about is probably my first piece of advice. And my second piece of advice is don't limit yourself to one mentor. Your postdoctoral supervisor is obviously an important mentor. That's obviously an important relationship. And there's obviously, you don't want to devalue that in any way, but multiple perspectives are wonderful. So seeking out people in academia, in other communities that you're part of, who have insight into you, who have insight into your science, who have insight into your career. For me, who have insight into balancing family with career. I would advise you, don't limit yourself to just the one mentor. Maybe my third piece of advice is related to that. It's don't be afraid to integrate the advice across those mentors. You're going to get slightly different perspectives. You're going to have a slightly different perspective. Don't be afraid to integrate those perspectives and find ways to make them work together. You don't have to throw one out because it disagrees, but find ways to put together the great perspectives that you get from yourself and from your mentors.
So we talk about your inspirations coming from the past, your current research, and I would just want to ask you one question to take a little bit. What's going to be your next step in your future research or professional development?
Honestly, I'm very excited about the potential of ultrasound. This idea of being able to basically non-invasively poke the brain and then see what happens, right? And I think it's going to unlock a whole new world of questions to be answered about how the brain works, about how we can treat neurological disease, and a whole new set of opportunities to treat disorders that really are currently undertreated. There's a lot of patients who don't respond well to therapies. Either they don't respond, they're not effective, or there's too many side effects. And so I think the next step in my development is I'm right now in the process of really studying out where can I have the biggest impact on helping that happen. So I'm in the process of applying to a lot of academic positions. That's quite a time-consuming process. I've put in several applications already, and there will be many more to come. And just looking broadly to understand, where can I go to really help this technology take the next step, which I think is into the clinic. It's into clinical trials, and that's what I'm excited to try to do. And any opportunities that let me be part of that are exciting to me. So I'm looking for those.
Do you have any advice for prospective PhD or incoming postdoc who are interested to applying for the F32 fellowship?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice is go for it. And the reason is whether you get it or not, it will be extremely valuable to you. Taking the time to say, what am I here doing? What questions am I trying to answer? You probably think you already have answers to those questions, but when you sit down and you try to write several pages about it, you're going to find that, you have answers, but there's also some clarity that you're lacking. And writing that application is going to help you find that clarity. And that document has, in many ways, guided my postdoc. And of course, there have been changes. And of course, I haven't stayed to it exactly. That's, you don't need to feel like it's set in stone, because certainly when you do research, you say, well, actually, in my case, maybe I don't want to do quite those parameters that I suggested. I based on these new data, I want to do this protocol instead. And there's certainly room to do that. But the overall thinking about the questions I want to answer and the data that I need to have in order to answer those questions has been probably as valuable, if not more valuable to me than the fellowship itself. So whether you end up getting it or not, it's well worth your time, especially early on, to write an application for a fellowship like this.
You mentioned about the fellowship itself and the process, how you write the application for the fellowship help you navigate through your postdoc. Do you find any additional or relevant training or workshop that you taking during the fellowship that helpful to you?
Yeah, the first thing I would note, since I'm part of the BRAIN initiative, is it's given me opportunities to be part of the BRAIN investigators meeting that have been really fabulous. And there's a couple other things that have been connected to that. There was a specific conference on tools for doing neuroscience that I got to be part of. And those discussions have, created some great networking, helped me become aware of research I didn't know about that's influenced my research. So that's been really helpful. They also do some conferences or some workshops on transitioning into faculty positions that have been great. It's been a little tricky in the pandemic, to be honest. All of this has been virtual. And so in the last 3 years, I've missed out on the chance to do this in person, which I think would have been an extra wonderful element. But even virtually, it's been great to be exposed to those other researchers. And yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is the Brain Investigators meeting has been really wonderful to be able to be part of that.
I have a small game for you before we end this interview. So this is just fill in the blank, and I'm just going to say the sentence, and you can finishing the sentence, and you're going to help me finishing the sentence. So are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, let's do this. So when I am not working on a research project, I am blank.
I'm either being a dad or reading a book.